So you've done some thinking and you've come to the decision that a full-blown chateau isn't necessarily what you're looking for. You want something a bit more manageable, let's say. So your logical thought is, let's start looking for a manor house. But it's not quite that simple. To start with, as I've mentioned in other videos, the difference between a manor and a chateau is nothing to do with the size, it's nothing to do with the architecture, it's nothing to do with the cost to build it in those days. It purely comes down to high and low justice and what the actual master of the domain actually had. If you had low justice, it was a manor. If you had high justice, it was a chateau. So this is why sometimes you get some very humble looking chateaus, and also you get some very imposing manor houses. But even that is just part of the calculation. Another thing you need to consider is the fact that there is the regional variance. For example, where I am in Brittany, there is a definite difference between a manor house and a chateau by their size, by their architecture, and also by their price. But where I am down here in the Dordogne at the moment, it's not quite as apparent. There's a little bit in the size, there's not really any architectural differences, and there's definitely not a difference in the prices. Another problem we're faced with is the French agents are obliged to use a fairly standardised software setup with only certain categories in it. This is all to do with actual transfer from the actual different software packages to the different property portals where you see the properties. The choice is very minimal. It tends to really be house, flat, building land, parking lot, or manors and chateaux clubbed in together, with the demeure, which is like a generic term, let's say in French, for a prestige home. If you add into this mix the fact that a lot of French agents, especially the newer agents or the younger agents who are, let's say, a bit eager, they will tend to class anything they can under a chateau, just because it sounds good and it's good for them to have on their books. And on the other side, the purist agents that won't class it as anything else but what it is, i.e. a chateau, a manor house, or whatever. All this makes looking for a manor house a bit awkward. So unfortunately you have to actually go manually looking, and if you type in manor you might not necessarily get all the properties on there. You can't really search on the portals, but if you start doing Google searches, there's a few terms you can use which will widen your net and give you a lot larger selection of properties. Let's start with this one. It's literally just around the corner from me in Périgord, and it isn't a chateau and it isn't a manor house. It's what the French call a chartreuse. The actual name came from the actual monks of the Chartreux order back in the day. They'd often build themselves a retreat in the actual middle of nowhere to live a life of silence and solitude. And the Chartres homes were built later on by the rich as their rural retreats, let's say. The other end of that spectrum is the hôtel particulier. The hôtel particulier, or the particular hotel, if you wish. It doesn't sound the same in English, does it? Basically, the hôtel particulier was where the wealthy people built their actual townhouses, and because they're in the towns and there's a lot of like footfall going past and all the other big wigs walking past their houses, a bit of one-upmanship there. So they often built very prestigious looking properties, but also they're actually built for two reasons. One was just to actually house the family itself, and the other part was to wine and dine their guests. So you tend to have not many bedrooms, but quite big reception rooms, but all done very formally and ornately, let's say. Following on from those, there's three other terms which are quite often used, and they have slightly different nuances and slightly different regional connotations, but basically are all the same sort of property. This is generally referred to as a maison de maître, or a master's house, or the maison bourgeois, which is, well, self-explanatory, bourgeois' house. And then down on the southern half of France, we often talk about un mas, M-A-S, mas. Basically, these were the very, you can almost class them as country home type properties as such. usually with first floor, ground floor, first floor, very ornate, very symmetrical, usually with outbuildings, etc. And like I said, these are depending on where the agency is based and what their preferences are. Might be a maison de maître, might be a maison bourgeois, might be un mas. And last and almost least is what the French call le corps de ferme, which literally means the body of the farm, or if you the way of looking at it is actually a group of farm buildings. This doesn't necessarily actually have a ornate, historical, wealthy side to it, but in real estate it's often used with poetic license to actually stipulate a very picturesque and wealthy setup, usually based on an old group of farm buildings but have been fully renovated, often with a courtyard setup or something like that. So there you have it, the 7, or should that be 6.5, different types of properties you can be looking for on the internet if you're looking for a manor house style property. As always, hope this helped. If it does, click the old like, subscribe and bell buttons down there. Buy me a coffee with the link at the top if it was helpful for you. That's always appreciated. You know, the French love their coffee. And I'll see you soon for another video. Bye.